Hi, I'm Rocket. Welcome to another Whiteboarding with Rocket. In this session, I'm going to talk through the Airship SDI connections that are running from the server room into the studio and talk about how we want to use those. Currently, from the server room to the studio, we have 10 SDI connections. Now, I put those 10 in. I wanted to do more, but when we looked at the size of the conduit and the number of cables and all the other stuff, realized that 10 was probably good, and it offers us just enough room to run fiber if we need to later. If we want to run a TAC12 fiber connection through there. Easy enough to do that. We have enough space. And so that's there. I didn't have the TAC12 fiber at the time, nor did I have fiber adapters for each end. That's definitely on the wish list. And probably we're going to need that at some point, but right now I think we have enough that it's going to work out very nicely. So of those 10 connections, both sides have patch panels at each end, and then there is a convenience panel in the rack from the ATEM, so that it's relatively straightforward to swap inputs and outputs if I need to during, as we're setting up. It's like, oh, we want to add one more camera. That's not a huge burden as long as we keep within a certain number of cameras. For this last video shoot, we had 6 cameras. One was a behind the scenes. It was a lock-off shot. And then we had 5 operated cameras. And that was a really good mix. I was watching the video and I was watching the behind the scenes with Marcia calling, and I realized she used all of those cameras. There was no throwaway shot there at all. And that was with 2 performers. So I don't know how many more cameras we would want if we had more performers. And what does that look like? What's the mix look like? And how do we want to operate that? So one of those SDI connections is currently dedicated to a in-room monitor. So we've got this field monitor in there right now. We can add it, change it out, make it a bigger monitor when we need to. But that's really nice because the people in the room can go to that one monitor and look at all the different cameras without having to go behind each camera. So it's really convenient, and I think we want to keep that in place going forward. So then if we want to do tally, and this is where things get a little interesting, we need an output from the video switch. This is all Blackmagic, by the way. So I know there's other ways to do tally, but we're in the Blackmagic ecosystem, and I don't see us getting out of that anytime in the near future. I'm really happy there. I think there's some things we can do better and more, but let's just talk through the tally side of it. So there's an output from it could be it could actually even be the output to that in-room monitor, I believe. Would be messy cable-wise, but just one output that needs to go to some kind of distribution panel. And then return SDI connections need to go to each camera. And each camera needs a unique number so that when you switch to that camera, the tally light comes on, and there needs to be some kind of mapping. And I think the number of the camera should match the output or the input number in the ATEM, I think. So I'm going to do some testing there. We have a combination of Blackmagic 6Ks and Ursa 12Ks. The Ursa 12Ks, I believe, have a return SDI input already. So we could just run a single SDI connection and we're good. For the 6Ks, because they have HDMI output, I believe we need to run into the bidirectional converter. We need to run an SDI to that. And then we need to set the number on the bidirectional converter. You can go into the configuration and give it the number so that it knows when it turns on. What is that distribution panel? I don't know. That's some things to research. I'm looking for input on that. Is there things that are relatively inexpensive that we can have in place? And can we actually say that that is the in-room monitor? So that would give us an additional SDI connection. So that's an idea that just popped recently. So we'll look at that. And that would, if we did that, so let's go with the worst case scenario and say one of those SDI connections is going to be the in-room monitor, and then one's going to be for tally. right? That gives us 8 connections. And so that is probably a good mix. And because of the having the patch panels on each side of those runs and then having the convenience panel in the server rack, it's not difficult to reconfigure the patches. So if we decide, actually, we want to have another return monitor that the band can see because we've got people joining on Zoom, right? We can quickly flip that connection over to an output rather than an input, and vice versa. So these are some considerations that we've got going on as we move forward with new bands coming in and new video shoots happening, hopefully sometime in February. And with that, I'm Rocket. This has been another Whiteboarding with Rocket.